Hey all, so back with another Spotlight with Context, and today we are talking about the recent rework to Sentinel. I'm really excited about this one. I really enjoyed Sentinel back in the day. One of my older war videos is a Wolverine Weapon X boss solo with Sentinel when it was one of the best options, kind of before Nimrod came around. And I've always almost enjoyed the kit, right? Like it's just been a little bit too slow, a little bit too annoying, too many hoops to jump through relative to everything else. And I'm really happy to see it getting its flowers with this. Very, very happy with how little had to change and just how good everything feels with those changes. So jumping right into the attributes, survivability of 3.5, Sentinel does become quite tanky, but doesn't start out that way. It can fully recharge its health with the special 3, but that requires getting to the special 3. And so if you just get blitzed early, you're kind of out of luck. But once you get rolling, you are very, very safe. Damage of 3 similarly ramps up to really good damage. There is kind of a ceiling on it. Once you are fully ramped, you don't ever really go above that. You're applying a bunch of boosted incinerates with the special 2. You're throwing a bunch of special 2s. You have just good constant damage, but there's definitely a plateau, and you do have to work up to it a little bit for it to come online. I'm going to be completely honest. I think it probably comes out a little higher than 3, but this is not too far off. My personal read would probably be about 3.5. This is a two-way champion, right? Sentinel is definitely a defender first, but is plenty serviceable on offense, especially outside of battlegrounds, and the damage is there when you need it to be. Ease of use 3.5. Sentinel was always pretty easy to use, but it was frustrating to use. And I think the biggest thing that's changed with this kit is that that's no longer really true, and so there's a lot less in your way trying to get the most out of this character. Utility of 3, most of this is in the form of immunities, but there is both armor break and heal block in this kit. And if you need somebody who doesn't die to a bunch of things, who has heal block or armor break, Sentinel's your robot. And then defender strength of 4. Sentinel was always a bit of a stall. We have leaned into that, right? You're unlikely to die against Sentinel unless you just mess up a special dex, but it should take you a while to chunk through them, and these days, that in and of itself is worthy in a defender, and so we just leaned more into that, and I think Sentinel now is a true 4 out of 5 defender. So getting into strengths and weaknesses, we already talked about heal block. The heal block, when fully charged, is quite good, and you can spam it pretty efficiently. We have a lot of damage over time immunities, and I think Sentinel's the only tech champion immune to armor break as of this. Like, Nimrod doesn't have armors removed by armor break, but unless I'm forgetting someone, nobody is actually immune to armor break in that class. So that's a pretty unique piece of utility that you can take into certain content where it matters. And then spare Sentinel bot, which is a quick way of saying the special 3 fully recharges your health. It also resets pretty much everything about the fight except analysis charges, which can be very powerful. We'll talk about that more a little bit when we get there. Weaknesses, energy resistance. Most of Sentinel's damage is shock or incinerate, and that means that people not taking as much damage from those is a problem. And then debuff control. Basically everything Sentinel does is debuffs. We have not given it ways to get around that, and so if you're facing somebody who shrugs a lot of debuffs, Sentinel's probably not who you want to reach for. So getting into the abilities, always active. Sentinel bots are immune to poison and bleed. That came back. We added armor break as well as cold snap and frostbite. So very resilient robot. Analysis charges still go up to 100. And this is the same basic thing as before, but I will spend some time on it for those who haven't played Sentinel before. This kit defines actions as light attacks, medium attacks, heavy attacks, dashing, dodging, and blocking, right? So anything outside of those actions does not feed into this. You don't necessarily need to worry about, like, oh, did I idle twice, right? And similarly, a medium attack followed by an idle animation followed by a medium attack still counts as two mediums in a row. So really, when you are looking for the definition of things repeating or not, you just want to look at these specified actions. Now, that said, when your opponent repeats the same action consecutively, Sentinel gains 6 analysis charges, again up to 100 max. Against mutants, Sentinel gains twice as many from this, so that's 12 for each repetition. I want to note as a change, Sentinel used to gain half analysis charges against Cosmics. That is no longer here. Cosmics have enough other weapons at cutting through Sentinel's defenses, like true damage and that kind of thing, that they're doing okay. They don't necessarily need to also cut analysis charges. You can still play around them with anyone. It's important to note, it just will slow you down a bit. When the opponent activates a special attack, if it matches the previously activated special attack, then Sentinel gains 20, or against mutants, 40. So that ramps you very quickly. And then in Battlegrounds, Sentinel starts each fight with 25 analysis charges. I do want to point out, this is not a gain, this is just a starts with. This is not boosted against mutants. Mutants don't make you start with 50, you still get the 25, but then everything else is doubled. Now, the effects of analysis charges, these scale as you're on your way to 100. For every 10, Sentinel gains a certain amount of armor rating and crit resistance. These together add up to an incredible amount of tankiness, because that is 2,000 plus critical resistance, and it's protecting that 2,200 armor with that crit resistance, because crits cut through armor, remember? So between those two, you are not going to be taking a lot of damage from hits. And then a large amount of attack rating at max analysis charges. That is just 100% of base attack rating again, and special attacks cost 3% less power. So again, at 100 analysis charges, that's 30% less power. This lets you spam them pretty efficiently. And then this last part is new. The potency of incoming instant damaging effects from champions is reduced by 5%, so up to 50%. This is similar text to what Serpent has, and so this is specifically looking at bursts of damage, right? Now, that can be typed bursts of damage, so like Guardian's instant shocks, those count. Anything instant that has a natural duration of 0 is counted here and reduced by up to 50%. So this means that, Serpent's instant cold snaps will also be less effective. Hercules' bursts of damage will be less effective. Quicksilver and Deathless She-Hulk with their traumas will be less effective. Unless you play around analysis charges, you cannot rely on those red burst numbers. Then once analysis is complete, in addition to those scaling effects above, Sentinel gains extra abilities. Personal debuffs can be inflicted through the opponent's block. Shock, Incinerate, Heal Block, and Armor Break debuffs gain 50% increased duration and 100% increased ability accuracy. That ability accuracy is a return, but I do want to call out the increased duration might look like a nerf, because it used to say 100% increased duration, but that was actually us bringing up the floor. The base duration on Sentinel's debuffs is now higher, such that this 50% increased duration brings it to the same maximum. So the ceiling is the same, but what you get out of the box is better. And then while charging a heavy attack, Sentinel becomes passively unstoppable for 1 second. If struck while this unstoppable is active, it goes on cooldown for 5 seconds. But if you aren't struck, you can use it again and again, which I think is a very important. But if you aren't struck, you can use it again and again, which of course is very helpful if you try to use it and you don't need it, and then suddenly the next time you do. So heavy attacks, if analysis charges are below 100, this inflicts an Intimidate debuff for 5 seconds. This means the opponent is more likely to block. You are more likely to be able to get them to block multiple hits in a row. Boom, there's your easiest way for ramping analysis charges. And then once you're at 100, you don't gain any benefit from hitting their block, so the Intimidate goes away, and you can safely use the Heavy just for the shock. That final hit inflicts a pretty sizable shock debuff, which again, the duration has been increased at base and then is stronger once you are fully ramped. If Sentinel's at 3 bars of power, then this consumes 30% of a bar to inflict an additional shock debuff. And once you do that, once you've consumed 30% of a bar of power, not only are you benefiting by getting that additional shock debuff, you also can now throw the special 2, which is often very helpful because the special 3 can only be used once, and you may not want to use it the first time you get to it. It's also worth pointing out, this shock debuff doesn't have a chance listed. By default in our game, that means that something has a 100% chance, as long as it is a debuff buffer passive, right? And when something with a 100% chance gets 100% increased ability accuracy, that means it starts ignoring ability accuracy reductions. So once Sentinel is fully ramped, this shock debuff will ignore glancing and other similar effects. Important thing to call out there. On to the special 1, the first hit inflicts a heal block debuff for 16 seconds. This will also ignore glancing once ramped. And then the further hits in the special 1 have a 50% chance to inflict an armor break debuff for 6 seconds, which will obviously be 100% once fully ramped. Special 2, each hit inflicts an incinerate debuff. Again, these will ignore glancing once ramped, and then each hit has a 50% chance to inflict an additional incinerate, which will become guaranteed when ramped. Special 3, this is the biggest change. This attack destroys the current Sentinel bot and removes all buffs and debuffs that were on it. Then a spare Sentinel bot is called in to take its place, which arrives at full health. So this is a reset to the health bar. This is not healing. This is not regen. So this is not subject to regen rate reduction. You can't prevent this with despair. You can't reverse it with void. You can't stop it with a heal block. If this special 3 is thrown, Sentinel will be at full health. I also want to call out that removes all buffs and debuffs. That can be a really big deal. This is not a nullify. This is not a purify. Nobody can mess with this. They're just gone. And so if you are facing a node like Steady Build Up Unblockable, where debuffs on you eventually make your opponent permanently unblockable until a debuff goes away, those nodes are often paired with a single indefinite debuff, and so you can't get rid of that once it's on you. Except with this. There are a number of other places where that's going to come up, but if there is an indefinite debuff on you that you need to get rid of, this special 3 will do that. And then spare Sentinel bots are persistent. This just means you can only do this once per quest. Once you've thrown the special 3, this special can't be activated. So it is truly only once per quest. It's very powerful, but it's limited. And this is, again, why the heavy attack gives you the ability to consume your own power for a benefit, so that you aren't forced to use this if you don't want to. Then signature ability, personal debuffs other than Intimidate gain up to 40% increased duration, so now they're even better, and you have a higher floor on them, right? Because it's important to note that this is not multiplicative with the duration increase from max analysis, right? A 5-second debuff is not becoming 7 seconds from this and then getting another 50% to be 10.5, right? It's getting 40% from this, 50% from max analysis, and so that 5-second debuff will be 9.5 seconds. But this means that at SIG 200, that debuff starts at 7 seconds, and then max analysis takes it to 9.5. So your floor is even higher, as well as your ceiling, and there is, relatively speaking, less distance between them. So that's a really nice benefit there. And then once per fight when dropping below 20% health, Sentinel activates 3 armor up buffs. These are chunky armor ups, and by this point, Sentinel's probably ramped enough that it has a bunch of crit resist protecting these armor ups. They last for 3.5 seconds, expiring 1 at a time. Each time one of these armor up buffs ends for any reason other than Pulverize or Sentinel's own abilities, such as the Special 3, Sentinel passively gains 90% of a bar of power. So this means that once this triggers, Sentinel is going to start gaining power if you don't have access to Pulverize, and so you need to aggressively bait out specials. Remember that by this point, Sentinel will probably be ramped, its specials will cost 30% less power, and so you're probably not going to be able to get it all the way down to 0, right? The lowest you're ever going to get is 30% of max power, which means that if all 3 of these expire, boom, that's a special 3, and the fight basically restarts for you, but worse. But if you bait out those specials, you have time. You have 3.5 seconds in between each chunk of power to deal with this. You can mess with the power gain with ability power rate reduction or reversal. There's no protection against that. And it is worth pointing out that these armor up are specifically looking for them ending. So I'm pretty confident, I don't actually remember testing this, but you can prevent this whole thing by preventing the armor ups. They don't gain increased ability accuracy, so neutralize works. Having Fate Seal up before this happens works, but once they're up, Fate Seal still causes problems. And then, of course, you can just use Pulverize. So there are ways around this, but it is a very significant threat, and you do have to plan for it, or you're going to run into some problems. And then I'm not going to go over the synergies. They're basically the same. They're all minor, class-related, not a huge deal. But that's basically Sentinel, right? It is a recognizable kit. It still has all of the same basic building blocks: Heal Block, Armor Break, Incinerate. It still combos really well with the relic of the same name. It's just that now everything about the kit plays better. It has extra immunities, extra defenses. It's significantly more formidable on defense, and it can fully reset a fight once per quest. But not fully reset, because you still get to keep your analysis charges and all of those benefits. So I'm really, really excited about this one. I enjoy Sentinel quite a bit. I will say, I know the animations get to some people. If Sentinel's not for you, that's fine, but give it a shot, because there's a chance the animations weren't the only thing holding you back, and that most of it was actually that these relatively clunky animations were comboing with how clunky the kit used to feel to get results out of, and that part is gone now. So once Sentinel gets buffed, give this a go, see how it feels. I think you're going to be, I don't know that you'll be surprised, but I think you'll be pleased, if not pleasantly surprised. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and take care.